managers are the culture carriers. Because, people join companies, believe managers. And managers have been put into the position of looking after people and often not given the tools to lead.
Chad Peterman here, and you are listening to Can't Stop the Growth, a platform for leaders and teams to grow and thrive. We highlight the importance of personal development, pursuing greatness, and always chasing your potential. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to another episode of Can't Stop the Growth. I'm your host, Chad Peterman, and today we are going to talk about a topic that I talk about a lot. Culture in your workplace is something that I think everybody is aware of. Everybody talks about it. Everybody is trying to build it in their own unique way. I think the differentiator and the reason why I'm excited to have our guest on today is about how do we tactically build culture? And I think a lot of that is what we'll talk about today is how do I get the feedback? How do I action the feedback? And then how do I ultimately create a better culture? If you're sitting in your seat as a leader, we've all got ideas on how we can build culture, but is it really making an impact? Are we pulling the right levers to build culture, or is it something that we've made up and we feel like we read it in a book and this ought to build culture and so on and so forth? And so I'm really excited to talk to our guests. Today we have on the show a gentleman that I met probably a month or so ago that really has a deep understanding for this and really has done some things, as you'll come to learn, that can help us really start to get tactical when it comes to culture. So without any further ado, we'd like to welcome the founder of SKOR, Mr. Eddie Geller. How's it going, Eddie?
Pretty good, Ted. Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be talking to you tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited as well. I know we had a great conversation around kind of what the product does and just more so high level on culture and feelings about it and everything like that. I think maybe it would be good to start with maybe a little of your background. I think you have kind of a unique background. I think it would be good for listeners to kind of understand, where you're coming from and then maybe kind of roll that into what SKOR does.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for the opportunity. So I guess originally an Aussie, born and raised in the beaches of Sydney, I now call New York home. And I guess I've always been an entrepreneur, always, I would say, build teams. My first company was a technology consulting company back in Australia. And that was really where I sunk my teeth into building teams and building thriving workplaces. And the byproduct of that, built a great company. And I was fortunate enough to exit that company in 2011. But I went through significant, lows and challenges, and thankfully enough highs to build a great business for about 100 people, and learned a hell of a lot about teams and leadership, and all the things technically we need to do and really strategically to build an incredible team that in turn would build an incredible company. Then fast forward a couple of years, co-founded a tech consumer app because I thought consulting, I've done that. Let's do something even harder, and nothing harder than consumer tech, I think, at the time. So that was 2012. And then 2014, we had enough traction in the US where I moved my wife and boys over from Sydney to New York. And that was in 2014, thinking we'd be here for a few years. And then 2 became 3, 3 became 4. And I'm sure you can guess where this story goes. Now kids in college and American excellence in the house. And now we call New York home. And I exited that business a few years ago. After, again, this whole area of like, building teams and building great companies, what's next really there? And that was the genesis of starting SKOR, which I'm happy to go into now or later, but really it's actually my most exciting problem I'm solving for, most exciting venture ever in my history. And solving, I guess, the universal problem of measuring workplace culture, which again, hopefully we'll get into today, but deeply passionate about culture and measurement.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that. I think that gives kind of a good basis for where you're coming from, right? You've built companies, you understand the importance of culture and, as you call it, building teams, which I think is really impactful as well. I guess kind of maybe take us from kind of what were the lessons learned in your previous ventures that lended itself to, hey, this could be something that could be really beneficial for organizations. And then I think transitioning, what does it actually do? How do organizations leverage this tool?
Sure. Probably my biggest lesson was in my first company, Chad. Now I think it was about 2008. We're probably about 80 people at the time, 85 people. We're doing about 10 million revenue. Again, we're a technology consulting web development company. We're doing about 15% EBITDA, so pretty good. And if someone said, how does that fare? I think in a professional services, 15% was pretty good. And if someone asked me, tell me a bit about your culture, I would say, we're pretty good. We're family. We're all about the people. We had great times together. I think our core values at the time were just something embarrassing. Now learning what I know, but hey, you got to start somewhere. I think we're people, integrity, and excellence, what I call values. And anyway, we'll tell another topic we can get into as to why that's not exactly ideal today, but that's what it was at the time. And I thought we had a pretty good culture. I think I would describe us as a solid, robust culture. And then, unfortunately, a financial crisis hit us, and 4 of our biggest customers terminated their contracts. This is back in September 2008. And we went from, roughly 85 people, so roughly 75 billing, to 20 billing people. We lost 40 to 50 billable people that could generate work overnight. And what was really quite enlightening and really confronting at the time, beyond the fact that we're hemorrhaging cash hand over fist, was that people started to blame each other. And, sales were blaming the delivery teams that they didn't do a good job. That's why the customers terminated. The delivery teams were blaming sales. Sales should have had a better pipeline to have more work. And I think we had a blame culture, frankly. I don't think we have a great culture at all. And truly the definition of culture, because the most incredible cultures, people galvanize and connect with one another when things are tough. When things are tough and you start blaming, that's the root cause of not having a great culture at all. So I learned really through the school of hard knocks, frankly, what it took to rebuild. And I had to let 45 people go in the space of a month, which is probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in my career. And we got to 30 people in January of 2009. And that was really this whole, epiphany that I had to rebuild the culture from within, focused on bottom up, all about the people. We reset our core values. We focused on transparency. We focused on, collaboration, and leading into, everything that was around how do we drive goals and tactics together around success. We implemented the Great Game of Business and lots of tools around that. So in fast forward the clock to 2011, so 3 years later, we're about 13 million revenue. We got to 22% EBITDA. Not only did we rebuild, but we rebuilt with 50% better profitability, all about the people. And that was plus bonuses on top of that we gave out. So, again, firsthand experience with what it was to have a poor culture that I thought at the time was a good culture, to really an incredible culture as measured by financial results, but also we won all these awards from the team, et cetera, and from, Great Place to Work, all those things externally. That was really the biggest learning I had to what was the before and the after of true workplace culture around teams.
Yeah. No, that makes a whole lot of sense. And I say it makes a lot of sense because I think that, as you called it, the blame culture, especially in the trades when you have kind of an office component and then you've got a field component, the blaming can start early and often, to where whose fault is it? Why are we not doing what we're supposed to doing? I'm not getting good calls, whatever it may be. I guess when you started to, you shrink down your team, what were some of those first steps? And I asked this question based on, if listeners are sitting there going, hey, I think I've got a little bit of this going on within my company. Like, what were those first couple of things that you started to see? Like, okay, these are like breaking down some walls here that I really like. Like, what were those first things that you and they could have went great, could have not went so great, whatever it may be. What were some of those first things that you kind of touched on?
Yeah, totally. I think the number one thing that I reflect upon that had the biggest impact was that it's leading into transparency and vulnerability. Just to get as raw as I could go in terms of the difficult times we're in, the difficult situation we're in terms of there was nothing I didn't share in terms of the facts. Here are the facts. Here's the situation. Here's where our, financials are out. Sales, delivery, clash, this is, where the situation is in terms of where we're trying to get to, and this is what we're trying to do to bring everyone together. And I think, it's all about doing that continuously, right? Rinse and repeat, like in town halls, in weekly sessions with the staff, was all about like, I over communicated the facts and over leaned into the solve. So rather than me having the answers, I leaned into lots more curiosity about, what do you all think? What should we be doing differently? How should we be creating this culture moving forward? How do we generate sales? So we implemented new programs around referrals, implemented programs around people on site, them generating sales. Like, frankly, it's now everyone's problem. Sales is everyone's problem. Delivery is everyone's problem. The cash is everyone's problem, not just mine anymore. So it obviously, as you would appreciate, it took a while for this to sort of sink in, but I was very consistent in my repeatability of the facts. And what was really amazing is like people started to band together and contribute and suggest things and solve things. And I think sort of this reset happened January 2009. And I think all the way through to probably September 2009 was really when we had the quantitude. People were like bought in and we started to rebuild and regrow. And I think, as you know, when you're telling everyone there's no more bad news, people need to actually see there's no more bad news, not just like hear it. So as long as we're into the period of that first 3 to 6 months, there was no more bad news. There's only like bumps and bruises and good news, because we started to win some business. We reset our obviously our cost base and reset, obviously what success was, because, you have to redefine success when you get hit the way we did. And the other thing we leaned into extensively was lots of small celebrations, as opposed to waiting for this big celebration. That's another thing I learned through this year, was every opportunity to celebrate, we celebrated. I'm not saying we partied, we went out and big nights, just small recognition of celebration in every capacity, in person and remote, where we could, just small celebrations to pause and recognize the efforts and the small wins. And the small wins led to bigger wins and on and on. But I guess these small tactics probably helped us really reset the culture, and we just built upon that in years to come and got back up to the financials, and we got back up to 100 odd people a few years later.
Yeah, I think a lot of that stuff is hugely impactful. I think that so often as leaders, there's two things. One, we are hesitant to share information, but then we get mad when people don't feel empowered. They're not making any decisions. They're not doing anything. And it's like, well, put yourself in their shoes. How are they supposed to make an informed decision if they don't have all the facts? And so I think that there's that piece of, they've got to have all the information. And I think the other piece is like what you said, is like that coming from curiosity, like listening to people. Like if people don't feel like they're listened to, they're probably not going to speak up, because it's like, well, what's my opinion worth here? But we also are hesitant to listen if they don't have all the information, they can't make an informed decision. So like we don't listen because, they're not going to know. It's like, well, yeah, they're not going to know because you never told them. So it's kind of this like endless cycle of, not asking for feedback. I know one of the things we started up end of last year was we do a COO, basically town hall with all of our field professionals, where it's like, hey, here's what's going on. Give us your feedback. And what we saw was there was a lot of feedback at first. And then once you start tackling problems that they have, and most of them are like legit, like, oh yeah, crap, we need to really fix that. All of a sudden that starts to dwindle, and it becomes a hell of a lot more positive meeting of like, hey, let's just celebrate wins. Let's do all of these things. And I think it's so important to, be curious with your teams, because if you're not, you're never going to create any sort of collaboration. It's always going to be you pulling the boat with everybody else in it, as opposed to everybody rowing in the same direction.
100%. And so we just see a couple of things as you share that, Chad. So the old school order, like when I was growing up, my dad was a contractor. He was a carpenter, And I was growing up like, the definition of courage was not sharing or not sharing weaknesses, right? So it's like I got to solve this problem, this sort of bravado as the sort of the father of the household, so to speak. But it's flipped 180. Courage today is the opposite. Courage is leaning into your vulnerabilities, leaning into weakness, sharing your challenges, sharing your opportunities, and being honest about where you're at and where you're not. And I wish more leaders would lead into having their team solve their problems than they solve the problem. It's almost like before they had to have this bravado of solving it, and now it's the opposite. The other thing that I thought about when you were sharing your story, Chad, was one thing I did in my last company to lean into sort of to help out with this vulnerability and courage piece and celebration. Every Friday we'd get together and have what's called this wins and fails meeting. And we go around the room virtually, because this is through COVID when we started, that each person would have 60 seconds to share their win for the week and fail for the week. And it really created this connection for people of leaning into like the fails of the week, and people sharing like real deep failures for both personal, professionally, and also wins to celebrate all the wins, because we all have wins and fails every week. It's just not acknowledged or heard. And that created incredible connection, an incredible amount of like camaraderie of we're one team together, just getting through things, and we all have challenges in our lives, but also just we all want to help each other as well. So learning and supporting each other was a great way also to lead into sort of a challenging time. So wins and fails is something that I'm a big fan of. That is such a simple tool in teams on a weekly basis, done well, very powerful.
Yeah, I think I'm a big believer. I think this is a newfound belief that I've had, is that if you do something within your organization, it is not part of your culture unless you do it consistently. And to your point of having it every week, like people know that this is a part of our culture. We do this meeting. This is what we do. It can't be just hey, I'd like to get everybody together and let's just do this, and then it falls off and you never do it, because that's not part of your culture. Our thing, we have another staple is we have leadership training every Tuesday at 8:30. Rain, wind, shine, whatever it is, we're having it, because we want that to be part of our culture. We want leadership development to be part of our culture. Well, I can't just do that haphazardly. I've got to plan out what it is. And so I think it's important for listeners, as you're taking some of this in and kind of downloading the information, is how can I do this consistently? Our COO round, or town hall, I should call it. We do it first Friday of the month. So this Friday, because it's the first Friday of May, we will have the COO roundtable. And it has to happen, and we got to do it. And everybody knows that we are in fact doing it. So they know by first Friday is blocked out. And so I think that's something, it's a small detail, but I think it's super powerful.
I love that. To your point, I mean, and that's what builds trust, right? As they say, consistency of behavior over time. Right. So if you're doing the same thing over time and building that into the culture, it leans into trust and clearly engagement on an ongoing level. Right. So, and what I'd love to see more of is that across all teams, because as you know, Chad, like every manager and leader is a culture carrier. So I find that, you could do it at a high level, at the CEO level and leadership level. I think that's great. But if we don't cascade and do this at every team level with every local leader and local manager, then it kind of gets filtered and the message gets lost as they get on with their day, because that's where the real work happens. And that's where the real leadership happens, right? Because you can do great things once a month at one level, but then on a day-to-day team level, if that leader's not supporting that team, not leaning into all the things that their culture really wants to be part of, then that team and those people will not actually enjoy that experience at all, and not be engaged and have no trust and have no performance, of course. So I always talk to leaders about how all your managers and leaders are doing this. And I love that you have every Tuesday morning leadership development piece. I love that. That's so good, because it's all about learning and leaning into that learning. But that, that learning and that application in teams is really critical. I wish more organizations would embrace.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think it's so important too in the trades, because as you said, with your with your father being a carpenter. The one thing we hear around here is, guys have been doing this a while is no news is good news. Like that's the culture that they've been brought up in is like feedback. What's that? Like I just go out and do my job. And I think the best way for a manager who's managing field professionals is, hey, it should be consistent. And if you know that there's an ingrained fear in asking for feedback or sitting down with somebody and discussing wins and losses, like the best thing you can do is make that consistent. So, hey, Billy, here's the deal. Every other Tuesday, we're going to sit down and meet. Because if it's not organized and it's not consistent, his natural inclination is to anytime I meet with my manager, I must have done something wrong. So like, what's going on, what I do. But if he knows that regardless of my performance, every other Tuesday, I meet with my manager and I've got a couple things that I'd like to give to him. And, I'd like to discuss this thing that I ran into. And it's not so much a disciplinary thing. It's legitimately, I want to hear your feedback. Like, where can I help you out?
I love that. I love that. And to your point though, the whole thing with one-on-ones, I love the fact that you do it consistently. So few organizations do. And the other thing is that the one-on-one meeting is not the manager's meeting. It's the team member's meeting. The team member needs to come to the manager in that one-on-one and like, this is where I'm stuck. This is where I need help. This is what's short of my learning goals, what are my team goals. Like, but the manager needs to clearly lean into that curiosity. It's like, well, how are you doing? And like, it's like my favorite question is like the second question. It's like as a manager, you go, how are you doing? And the person says, yeah, all good. Second question is, no. How are you really doing? How you tell me what's going on? Like what's happening at home? What's happening, in your personal life? And obviously you need to build trust to be able to have that relationship. But I mean, we used to give our managers a question bank. And I go, your job is to lean into questions. And actually the one thing we try to get all managers to do is finish all their sentences with a question mark. And just lean into curiosity and questions. And clearly, of course, not everything is going to be there. You need to provide statements, of course. But just if more managers leaned into questions about life in that one-on-one, like, what were your wins last week? What surprised you? What did you hear from a team member that surprised you? What did you hear from a customer? Like, just those really broad questions, and they're leading the witness, like in terms of, what did you hear from the customers? Did they say we're really good or really bad? No, just stop it. What did you hear from my customers? Like, no leading the witness style questions, all open-ended questions. And as long as you get the team member talking and then you're engaging with them, that's your job as the leader. Like your job is to help them get unstuck and achieve their goals, whatever that is. And that could be personally too. Like, hey, I want to do a marathon. Like, okay, how are we helping you with your personal time to get fit for it? Or I want to organize this travel, like for the family or whatever. Like we always try to coach leaders on your job is to help this person thrive professionally and personally. Like there's no such thing as, if the human is different in the workplace to out the workplace. We just have to help them understand that we're there to support them. So much around the manager-leader relationship that I think we could help leaders with.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think too, it's about conveying to them that your main focus, yes, especially in the trades, it's get the work done. Like make sure we get the work done, make sure we, hit our sales numbers, make sure we hit our conversion rate, our average tickets, all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, if we place our focus on developing our people, the results, we don't have to focus so much on the results. Like we'll get it done. We'll get guys that are, knocking it dead and doing really good work. But it's when we don't focus on them and then we just focus on the end result that we forget about how we actually get the end result done. It's via
100%.
our people that are going to get that work done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely right. It all comes down to that relationship, to your point. Like get the work done, but we're here to support you in the work. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's shift gears a touch because I want to give you the opportunity to talk about SKOR. Obviously, we went over it a little bit when we met previously, but I think it's a very interesting concept that whether they run out and use the product or not, I think that there's definitely things within it that could be valuable for listeners to hear about.
Just a quick background on the product and what we solve for and the why. I guess when I exited my last company a few years ago, it was very much the classic, now what do I want to do? And my passion and interest has always been about culture and people. I've always loved if someone asked me my last job, although I was a CEO founder, what was your job? I said, my job is to create an environment in which people can thrive. That's my job. And if we fail, it's on me, and I need to create that environment. And I thought, well, how do other CEOs think about people and culture? And as you know, Chad, very sadly, very few CEOs prioritize culture and people. It's a rhetoric. Yeah, of course, people and culture are important, but very few really prioritize and focus on them. And I think, well, you can build incredible teams and then build incredible companies. Then how do we convince more CEOs to prioritize their people and culture in the workplace? Because they're missing out by not focusing on the people, and clearly their people are too. So that the only way we could ever convince the millions of CEOs that don't prioritize people and culture is with data and measurement. Because as you know, people love numbers and we love comparing things and love measuring things. So I thought, well, if we can create a system by which we can measure workplace culture and then benchmark organizations, that would then potentially persuade more leaders to focus on people and culture. And that's really the genesis of starting SKOR. So SKOR, spelled SKOR, where we measure workplace culture, and every organization gets a score out of 100. And we not only measure the workplace, a couple of things. We measure every team in the workplace. So the team is defined by a leader, a manager, because managers are culture carriers. So every team gets a score out of 100, whether that's by department or location, or both, frankly. Then that's rolled up to an organizational score that then in turn we benchmark, because we have benchmark data on organizational culture. We then provide a roadmap of like, what are the things that each team needs to do to elevate their culture. And then we provide a business case as to what the potential profit increase might be if they were to improve their culture score. So in a nutshell, we measure culture and negative profit potential because we want to show CEOs everywhere in the world that they're missing out on a significant amount of profits because they're not focused on their people and culture. And frankly, they could solve a lot of their problems by focusing on the people and culture, but as you know, culture in the past has been, or still is, but because we've just only started this journey, is a very fuzzy term. It's very ephemeral. You ask 10 people in an organization what the culture is, and you have lots of words, lots of marketing words. And we want to change the conversation to be measurable, going, well, our culture is 75. Our score is 62. We're above the benchmark. And when you hear those numbers over time, it's transparent. It's black and white. It's not like you go to a company website and the about page is beautiful, and because of that, you think they have a great culture. As you know, the two things aren't related. But if we had a measurement system, kind of like the NPS for workplace culture, that's what we're creating. If we had a numbering system, then maybe we could convince more leaders to do it.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing. Tell me a little bit more about the roll up and why it's so important to have like departmental things. I think, most companies have probably done a quarterly survey, and we'll just survey this. And I ask this question because we too have made the mistake on this piece. So maybe elaborate a little bit on why you found that to be so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we kind of touched on this earlier. I mean, managers are the culture carriers. As you know, people join companies, believe managers. And managers have been put into the position of looking after people and often not given the tools to lead. So the hardest thing with evaluating teams is evaluating managers. And then more often than not, all the data is too subjective and too qualitative based. And performance reviews, and even performance reviews, like the manager reviews someone, and then that becomes the manager of the next team. So when you think about it, like most of the review is done by a person, not even in the team, not even the day-to-day work of that manager. So we've sort of flipped it on its head. And the other thing I just want to comment on the surveys, a lot of surveys, and I was guilty of this in my last company. All the surveys that are out there, engagement surveys, ENPS, pulse surveys, they're all lagging indicators. Engagement is a lagging indicator. Trust, care, all those things are lagging. The toughest thing with those types of questions is that you don't know what to do about it. The engagement score in this team is 62%. What does that mean? Like what are the three things I need to do to improve that? We found too much focus on symptoms rather than root cause. Whereas now that we assess teams, and all of our questions are leading-based questions, they're all behavior-based questions, we can then get the aspect of team measurement. So we're trying to sort of flip it on its head to be focused on teams. And the other thing I just want to say, lastly, to make us unique, is that the questions we ask managers are different to the questions we ask individual contributors. Because what we want to understand is how the leader is turning up and leading their team. And we want to understand how those individual contributors are receiving that leadership. And with that, you can get a full 360 of team with a lens of measurement. And then you get a score, because it's not just measured by the managers, measured by every team member. And that score, let's say it's 32, and I'm going to talk about how we measure in the aspects of it shortly, if you like, too. But when we get a score of, let's say, 32, we then can understand what the root causes are and what are the 3 things they could do to elevate that score by manager. Because as you know, you do these engagement surveys and overall, but where do you go with that? And how do you really get root cause by a leader? And that's what we're trying to solve for, is give a sort of a roadmap by leader or by team or by location to then improve the performance of that team. Because if we improve the performance of all those teams, then clearly the organization will improve. And that's the whole cascade alignment piece we're trying to.
Yeah, I think, as I said, we made this mistake of where, we just sent out one blanket survey to the entire company. And it's like, and then we're trying to take these blanket comments that people are making about the company and trying to relate them back to a manager, when it's like, well, like, they may love to work here, but they absolutely despise their manager. And it's like, well, we need to get down into that, or vice versa. They may, have some issue with some HR policy, this, that, or the other, and that gets scored against the manager, which he doesn't have any control over that. That's not his thing. And so to me, like, digging a little bit deeper, and then not so much, I think what we learned is not so much asking, and what you guys get at, not so much asking, what do you think about the company? It's more so, what do you think about your manager? Like, because that is truly who you, like, yes, you wear the name on the shirt, but at the end of the day, you're kind of working in conjunction with that manager. That's who you talk to on a daily basis. That's, all so on and so forth. Like, I used to get some high marks. Well, okay, but like, I haven't even talked to these people. Like, they're just like assuming like, oh, that would be, yeah, he seems like a nice guy. So I think that's really important when people think about getting feedback, is like, what are you asking of people, and is it directed in the right direction?
Even the questions to ask are so important. Like, for example, do you like your manager? And those types of generic questions. Obviously, they're tainted, right? And difficulty is, let's say, that morning there's something that really upset them, and they're just blurting out all this feedback in the moment of sentiment and emotion. But what we're asking for are all behavior based. So one of the questions that our clients love is on a scale of 0 to 10, how consistently does your manager walk the talk in their actions and decisions? Is your manager doing what they're saying they're doing or not? Like, so it's much more behavior based, because all these input style behaviors will then lean into the end of the day. Do I like this guy or girl or not? Right. But if they're there for me, it's like, for example, when you make a mistake, are you reprimanded, or is that a learning opportunity? How did your manager respond the last time you made a mistake? Are you invited to lean into a conflict in terms of, like, if you disagree with what's said, are you comfortable? Are you invited to say you disagree or not? So they're all the things I find, like, builds that relationship with that manager. Does that manager, like, give you the opportunity to push back? Do they invite you to learn? Do they invite you to go, hey, do you disagree with me? Like, let's talk about it. Like, or to, like, lean into that stuff. So they're all those behaviors our research shows are really the critical inputs to a great, amazing team. The manager needs to create that environment, right? The manager needs to sort of lean into those issues, and we won't know if they do unless we ask the team and we ask the manager. So it's much more behavior-based aspects. We've taken the science chat from sports teams of like, what are the indicators of high-performing sports teams, and just applying it to the workplace of, like, things like accountability, adaptability, transparency. We call it healthy conflict. All teams need healthy conflict, because if people disagree, you want them to say that, as opposed to breed resentment and then passive aggressive behavior outside the room. But the manager needs to create that environment, right? So lots of different aspects like that really lead into the behavior assessment, rather than the sort of the overarching outcome of the leader individual contributor relationship.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. How often would you recommend people's survey, whether it's, really digging in, like how often do you recommend that?
Yeah, great question. So just at a high level, our survey is 50 questions. Everyone gets the same 50, every organization has the same 50 questions. So it's a set baseline set of questions. It takes about 6 to 8 minutes to complete, right? Because every question is scored 0 to 10, right? It's not a lot of a heavy lift to write a lot of things. You're not writing anything. It's all scoring based. So with that said, about 2 to 3 times a year, the recommendation is on average every 6 months. Why? Because you want to, I mean, some clients do it 4 times a year. They want to do it quarterly because they're investing so much in their managers. They want to see the assessment regularly to see if that investment's working. You can do it every 3 months, right? Because again, 6 minutes is a lot of time to ask for every 3 months, frankly. And I guess if you get a score by team, you're then doing all this leadership development. So to your point, you're investing in these managers to make these changes over the next, on a weekly basis in the next 3 months. You want to assess them again. If that score hasn't moved and you've invested a lot in that manager, I guess you have some data to take some action. Maybe they're the wrong manager for the team. Maybe they're the wrong person for the company. Who knows? So, but we would err on the side of more regular than not, but at least twice a year.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, it gives you if you are a manager of managers, it also gives you some data on how to coach that person to be a better manager, not just like, well, your results suck, like get them better. And like, well, okay, what do you want me to do? Like, where do I start?
100%. And the other thing that is a fallacy is that often organizations will lead into retention as a proxy for success of culture. And that's just not accurate, right? Because people that have been there for a long time probably could lead into complacency and poor performance because they get comfortable. And it's like Bob's been leading this team for 10 years and Bob knows our customers, so Bob's great. But what does Bob's team think? Are they working at high performance? Is that really what we want? So often the data is like, performance needs to trump tenure. But tenure is important. Of course we want loyalty with our people, but we can't expect our people to basically say, you've been here forever, you got a job for life, just keep doing what you're doing. No, we want to continue to learn. We want our managers to learn and step up and be great leaders no matter what. So we'll always try and lean into it. And actually organizations can score by tenure. So you can get a score by people that have been there for less than 5 years and people have been there for greater than 5 years, right? You could score by, just like you could score by location in department, you could score by gender, you can even score by role leveling because it's all numbers based, Chad. So that's the great thing about the system. It's all numbers based. And again, unfortunately, tenure is typically a poor indicator of retention, but with performance, I mean, again, as measured by the team, could be really a powerful number to your point for the manager's manager to then be able to understand, like, who are my people I need to help lead and develop to grow, right? That's really what we want.
Yeah. No, that makes all the sense in the world. I guess if I'm sitting there and I'm like, yeah, this is something I know that I need, because we either have poor culture or we don't have a way to measure it. I mean, there's a number of different reasons why this would be applicable. What do you typically like? I guess what is the typical story of one of your customers who's using the product? Like why? I guess what I'm hunting for is if I'm listening to this. What are the things that you've seen companies say, I think this can really help us? Like, what are they struggling with?
Yeah, absolutely. A key thing we always get feedback from is just starting with the measurement, because today there's no measure on their scorecard for their people, right? And yes, you could have engagement score, but that's rarely updated. EMPS is poor. They're both poor measures and they're not measures of culture. So clients love the fact that we've got a number. And not only organizationally, but then you can cascade that to every manager. And on every manager's scorecard, they've got a culture score. So it's part of their performance review. And as you know, it's a number, it's benchmarked. You can compare internally and externally against it. So, and we, as humans, especially in business, we all love numbers. So that's one thing that they love. The second thing that they love is the fact that we provide them. Now, what do I do with that number? Not just about a number and that's it, like I'm throwing up in the air. We give top 3 recommendations by team/manager as part of the report. So these are 3 very specific options every leader can take in team to then improve that performance, right? So it has to be actionable, because if we're just giving a number for the sake of it, we're sort of, adding more problems to their lives rather than simplifying their lives. So we have to provide action. So I think the two biggest things are probably the measurement and the actionability are the two biggest aspects of clients loving the most. And then rinse and repeat. Let's assess again in 3 to 6 months, see how the scores have improved or otherwise, and then action accordingly and refine. So I think it's this building the muscle of teams, but we building the muscle with measurement. So we know directionally we're investing in the right way, because all other tools I've seen are all focused on symptoms, and we're trying to focus on the numbers and root causes.
Yeah, I think you brought up a great point that I wrote down is, do we give our leaders a leadership score? Like typically, to your point earlier, it's all lagging indicators. Like, you led good because you hit your budget for the month. Like, well, did they or did they not? Or are we using something that's very arbitrary that doesn't really speak to? Now, you could kind of tie, well, if you hit your budget, you've got your teams performing and, they must like doing all of these things. But like, the budget is an arbitrary number that we put out there. So that's not a great indicator of like, is this person getting better? Like, we can't say, well, he hit budget 8 out of 12 months, so he's getting better because he only hit it 6 months last year. It's like, well, or did we just set a better budget number? Was the budget number more attainable? Like, there's a lot of things that are moving targets that don't really give us a glimpse into how good of a leader is this person. And to your point, what do they need to be doing to get better at leadership? Like, we do training, but like, that's a step in the right direction, but it still doesn't give us, are you using what you're learning, or are you just attending to attend because you have to?
And on top of that, to your point, is the team receiving what you're learning? Like, what's the verification that learning is actually being applied in team? Which is why, like, often organizations like do 360s, where they're sort of getting 360 feedback from managers. It's a very heavy lift, very time consuming, and actually quite personal to get. Whereas what we're trying to do is provide a 360 on the team. So, you're investing in your leaders, Chad. Let's ask those leaders, their teams, how they're receiving that leadership, how they're receiving that. And again, leaning into the facts, not to say like, we're trying to like catch you out. If anything, is the opposite. We're trying to like help you improve with measuring. Just like we measure financials, you want to measure the culture of teams. If you measure it, you're going to focus on it. If you don't measure it, you won't. And you could have a great leader doing all the great things with their teams, and actually for some reason has not hit their financial numbers.
Yep.
But in inverse to your point, you could have someone hit their financials for whatever reason. They want a big contract or whatever the case may be, or they've had some good fortune with the metrics, but their team is suffering for other reasons. And you want both, of course, but you just want the data. Let's start with the data, and then you can then improve it and take actions with it. That's really what we're trying to do, is to really elevate the data linked to performance of managers and leaders, and then be able to do things with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Eddie, I really appreciate the time. I've enjoyed the conversation. We could keep on heading down this path for sure. I guess before we wrap up here, I think you've said a ton of valuable stuff. I guess if people are interested in potentially talking with you more about how this tool that you've created could help their organization, like, what's the easiest way for them to kind of get in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the prompt. I mean, our website's a great source. So Culture SKOR, SKOR, so cultureskor.com, our website. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So Eddie Geller, of course, on LinkedIn. And also, just for everyone's benefit, we actually have a SKOR preview on our website, sort of a 2-3 minute version of it. So if you just want to sort of, hey, what does this look like? I'm curious to see how it works. We've got a sample version on our website too. So but if someone wants to find me, I'm always up for a conversation and just learning a bit about how you lead. And if this is a tool that could be helpful, great. But just engaging at this level, I'm really passionate about building a movement of culture measurement to transform the lives of millions in their workplace to have incredible environments, right? That's the goal. But hopefully through those channels, someone can find me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for providing that. Again, listeners, I think if you're not taking this seriously, and by taking it seriously, I don't mean that you're not focused on building culture, because I think if you ask any leader, yeah, that's top of my list. That's top of my list. But I think that as we unpacked it today, there's a there's a lot of measurement that needs to take place. There are yard markers and different things that we need to be thinking about. How do we actually measure this? How do we take it to the next level? And most importantly, how do we improve it? Are we pulling the right levers? Are we doing the right things that are actually going to improve the culture? Or are we just, sending out a survey, crossing our fingers and hoping we get good marks? It's not always about that. And there could be a lot of stuff under kind of the veil of, well, I'll just, answer the survey and be done with it, and letting people know that we're actually going to make some changes, and we're going to make this better. And we need everybody's feedback to make that happen. So, again, appreciate the time, appreciate the insight. Listeners, definitely unpack this one. Lean into all there is to know about culture and how to improve it.
Fantastic. Well, Chad, thank you so much for inviting me on the show. I really enjoyed the conversation. I could talk about this ad nauseum. So I love the opportunity, and yeah, looking forward to obviously further discussions and hearing what the community thinks. So thanks so much again.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to connect with me personally, you can find me at chadmpeterman.com. To see what our team's up to, you can visit petermanbros.com. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel and consider joining the CSTG arena. As always, keep growing out there.